Okay, just going to do a video on the feature removal tool, which is quite a powerful thing within inside Keycreator. This is a solid model, and I've just coloured in some of the individual faces that make up the solid, and you'll see why in a bit. So feature removal tool, modify solid face remove. Okay, and it does things like this: pick a face, gone. It'll even do things like pick that internal face there, yeah, gone. It'll even trim stuff like that. It doesn't always work, and it works on these simple things, doesn't it? You see demonstrations and they always work, but when you get a real job, these things don't always work, do they? So things like, watch this, that one and that one. So you think, well, that's a nice fillet, yeah, it should work on that, accept. The hourglass is going, and as soon as you see the hourglass going for more than a few seconds, you're thinking, trouble. And it comes up with this, gap can't be filled, blah blah blah, failed, right, can't do it. So why can't it do it? Well, actually, let's just undo those commands and we'll mess around with this geometry. Now before we do that, I'm just going to create a copy of it. I tend to work on a copy and leave the original, so I've already created a layer called copy. So if I go on there and say copy entities 2, I can pick the solid, accept, and you see there's now one entity there, so I've got a copy of it. So I'll turn off the original, and now everything I do is going on this copy layer. Right, so why did it fail? Well, it actually failed because, would you believe, of this green surface here. You can see how this green surface ends in a point. So what the command's trying to do behind the scenes is it deletes these fillet surfaces, and then it tries to trim back these other surfaces. So it deletes the fillets and it tries to trim this one, and this. So it knows with this surface I'm highlighting that it can go downwards because it's got a general direction, it can do that. This one here, it knows this edge is going in that direction, but this one here, because it ends in a point, this edge that it's got, it doesn't know the direction it has to go in because it ends in a point. Now this end has got a line, so it knows a direction, but the other end it doesn't. It's not clever enough to do it, and that's why it's failing. It's purely because of that knife point. So just to demonstrate that, if I what can we do about that? Well, we can do a few things. If I do the unstitch face with the delete, I'll just delete that and that. Okay, so this is now an open body. It's got a great big hole in it where I've just chopped those surfaces out. So I'll rebuild that surface, and I'll rebuild it. There's lots of ways of doing this in Keycreator, but I'll rebuild it using a create surface by edge curves. Yeah, that should do it. And I'll use the chain option with 4 sides. So side 1 is that curve there, 1, enter. Second side is made up of that and that, enter. Third side, there's also 2 bits to it, is that and that, enter. And the final side is just that on its own, enter. Okay, so it's created a new surface. Now I don't know how close that matches the original. We can probably check that later, but let's assume it's okay. At the moment this is still a separate part. We've got to stitch it in, so we'll just do that with a stitch command. It says what surface you want to stitch, put a box around everything, hit return, and we're looking for the, there you go, stitching as form a closed solid. So that's now a solid. Right, let's try that command now, the feature removal. So feature removal again. So remember it's this one, return, yeah, it's got rid of that. So now we want to remove that and that face. It's done it. Okay, we'll just undo that, undo. So by just splitting that, or rebuilding that surface, it's now got basically a four-sided surface here, so it knows the directions that it has to travel in to trim up to that other one, and it can now do it. Now that may not be immediately obvious when you're modelling, so it's just something to look out for. I think in the next video I'll just repeat this, but perhaps looking at a different way to build this surface, maybe just to assume that the four-sided thing isn't good enough. We'll perhaps rebuild that a different way, but you can see anyway that that was the issue, and by just doing a little bit of modification, it wasn't that difficult. We managed to basically get rid of it and use the feature removal tool. So hopefully that's been of some use.